3 bullets. 3 bullets was all it took for Isabella Romano's life to shatter into pieces she could never put back together. The sound still echoed in her mind as she ran through the rain-soaked streets of Chicago, her father's blood still warm on her hands, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she had to run, had to disappear before they found her, before Santoro's men finished what they started. Her father's last words replayed in her mind like a broken record. "Find Dante. He's the only one who can protect you now." But how could she find a man she'd never met? A man whose name was whispered in fear throughout the city. A man they called the Devil of the North Side? If you want to discover how a terrified virgin running for her life became the obsession of Chicago's most dangerous mafia boss, stay with this story until the end. And if you believe that sometimes the most dangerous men have the gentlest hearts, leave a like and tell me in the comments what city you're listening from. Your presence here means everything. The alley was darker than sin itself, slick with rain, and something else Isabella didn't want to think about. Her lungs burned as she pressed herself against the brick wall, trying to make herself invisible, trying to quiet her ragged breathing. She could hear them. Santoro's men were close, their voices carrying through the storm, promising violence in casual tones that made her stomach turn. She was 23 years old, a grad student who spent her days studying art history and her nights working at her father's small Italian restaurant. She wasn't supposed to be here, wasn't supposed to know about the debts her father owed, about the dangerous world he'd tried so desperately to keep her away from. But ignorance hadn't protected her. Nothing could protect her now except the storm and the shadows and a miracle she didn't believe in. That's when she saw the black Mercedes. It pulled up to the mouth of the alley like a sleek predator, its engine purring in a way that spoke of power and money. The back door opened, and a man stepped out. Even in the darkness, even through the sheets of rain, Isabella could see he was different. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her entire education. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from never having to fear anything or anyone. His dark hair was slicked back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and dangerous beauty. And his eyes. God, his eyes. Even from 20 feet away, she could feel the weight of them, dark and assessing and absolutely ruthless. "Well," he said, his voice cutting through the rain like a blade wrapped in silk. "What do we have here?" Isabella's first instinct was to run. Every cell in her body screamed at her to bolt, to take her chances with Santoro's men rather than face this stranger who radiated danger like other men radiated cologne. But her legs wouldn't move. She was frozen, pinned by that dark gaze like a butterfly under glass. "Please," she heard herself say, and hated how small her voice sounded, how broken. "Please, they're going to kill me." The man tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He took a step closer, and she could see him better now. He was younger than she'd first thought, maybe 35, with a jawline that could cut glass and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. There was a scar running through his left eyebrow, pale against olive skin, a mark of violence that only made him more compelling. "Who's going to kill you?" His voice was calm, almost casual, as if they were discussing the weather and not her imminent murder. "Santoro's men. They killed my father. They're looking for me." Something flickered across his face at the name Santoro, something dark and terrible that made Isabella take an involuntary step back. "Your father," he said slowly. "Was Marco Romano?" She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The man was silent for a long moment, his gaze moving over her with a thoroughness that made her acutely aware of how she must look. Soaked to the bone, her dark hair plastered to her face, her father's blood still staining her white blouse. She probably looked like a drowned rat, a terrified, blood-stained, drowned rat. "Get in the car." It wasn't a request. Isabella hesitated, her mind racing. She knew enough about Chicago's underworld to recognize a predator when she saw one. This man was dangerous, possibly more dangerous than the men chasing her. But what choice did she have? Die in an alley or take her chances with a stranger? "Now," he added, and there was steel beneath the silk now. She moved on, shaking legs, splashing through puddles as she crossed to the Mercedes. The interior was warm and smelled of leather and something expensive and masculine. She slid into the seat, trying not to get blood on the pristine upholstery, trying not to think about what she was doing. The man slid in beside her, and suddenly the spacious back seat felt impossibly small. He was too close, his presence overwhelming, filling the space with an energy that made the air feel electric. "Drive," he said to someone Isabella couldn't see, and the car began to move. She pressed herself against the door, as far from him as she could get, her heart still racing, her hands still shaking. He watched her with those dark, unreadable eyes, and she had the unsettling feeling that he could see right through her. Past the fear and the grief to something she didn't even know was there. "What's your name?" he asked. "Isabella." Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Isabella Romano." "Isabella," he repeated, and the way he said it, slow and deliberate, made something flutter low in her belly despite her terror. "I'm Dante. Dante Moretti." The name hit her like a physical blow. Dante Moretti, the devil of the North Side, the man even other mobsters feared, the man her father had told her to find with his dying breath. She must have made some sound, because a ghost of a smile touched his lips, there and gone so fast she might have imagined it. "I see my reputation precedes me." Isabella couldn't breathe. She'd heard the stories. Everyone in Chicago had heard the stories. Dante Moretti had built his empire on blood and fear, had consolidated power in ways that made even the old families nervous. He was ruthless, merciless, a man who showed no weakness and took no prisoners. And she was alone with him in the back of his car, completely at his mercy. "Why did you help me?" she managed to ask. He was quiet for a long moment, still watching her with that unsettling intensity. "Your father once did me a favor," he said finally. "I pay my debts." The car wound through the Chicago streets, taking them away from the danger, away from everything Isabella had ever known. She should have felt relief, but all she felt was a strange, terrifying anticipation. She had escaped one danger only to throw herself into another. But as she sat there in the warm darkness, feeling Dante Moretti's gaze on her skin like a physical touch, she wondered if perhaps she hadn't escaped at all. Perhaps she'd simply traded one kind of danger for another, a more seductive, more dangerous kind. The penthouse was everything Isabella expected, and nothing she was prepared for. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Chicago's glittering skyline, the city spread out below like a kingdom waiting to be conquered. Everything was black and chrome and expensive, from the leather furniture to the abstract art on the walls. It was beautiful and cold and utterly masculine, a space that reflected the man who owned it with uncomfortable accuracy. Isabella stood dripping on the pristine marble floor, suddenly acutely aware of how out of place she was. Her cheap jeans and blood-stained blouse, her wet hair hanging in tangles, her complete and total lack of belonging in this world of wealth and danger. Dante stood by the window, his back to her, his phone pressed to his ear. He spoke in rapid Italian, his voice low and commanding, giving orders she didn't quite catch. Even from across the room, she could feel the power radiating from him, the absolute authority. He ended the call and turned to face her, and for the first time, she got a really good look at him in the light. Beautiful was the wrong word for Dante Moretti, though he certainly was. Devastating was closer. He had the kind of face that belonged on Renaissance sculptures, all strong lines and classical proportions. But there was nothing soft about him, nothing gentle. He looked like what he was, a man carved from violence and tempered in blood. His dark suit fit him perfectly, emphasizing broad shoulders and a lean, powerful build. And those eyes. Dark as sin and twice as dangerous, they watched her with an intensity that made her want to both run and stay perfectly still. "You're bleeding," he said, and his voice was different now, softer somehow, though no less commanding. Isabella looked down at her hands, at the cuts she hadn't even felt, at the blood that was hers, mixed with the blood that had been her father's. She started, then stopped, because what could she say? That she'd held her dying father in her arms? That she'd watched the light leave his eyes? That her entire world had ended 3 hours ago in a back room of a restaurant that smelled of garlic and gunpowder? Dante crossed the room with the fluid grace of a predator, and before she could step back, before she could protest, he was there, taking her hands in his. His touch was surprisingly gentle, his fingers warm against her cold skin as he examined her palms. "These need to be cleaned," he said, and there was something in his voice she couldn't identify, something that might have been concern if she didn't know better. He led her through the penthouse to a bathroom that was bigger than her entire apartment had been, all gleaming marble and polished chrome. He ran warm water over her hands, his touch careful as he washed away the blood, both hers and her father's, until the water ran clear. Isabella watched his face as he worked, mesmerized despite herself by the concentration there, by the unexpected gentleness in hands she knew were capable of terrible violence. "Your father," Dante said quietly, not looking up from his task, "was a good man. One of the few truly good men I've ever known." The words broke something loose in Isabella's chest, and suddenly she was crying, great gasping sobs she couldn't control. Dante didn't speak, didn't try to comfort her with empty words. He simply finished cleaning her hands, then pulled her against his chest, and held her while she fell apart. He smelled of expensive cologne, and something darker, something that was just him. His arms were strong around her, solid and warm and unexpectedly safe. She cried for her father, for the life that had been stolen from her, for the girl she'd been that morning who thought the world made sense. When the storm finally passed, Isabella pulled back, embarrassed by her breakdown, by the wet spot she'd left on his obviously expensive shirt. But Dante didn't seem to care. He simply looked down at her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "You'll stay here," he said. "It wasn't a question. Santoro won't stop looking for you. This is the only place in Chicago you'll be safe." Isabella knew he was right, but the thought of staying here, in this cold, beautiful space, with this dangerous, beautiful man, terrified her in ways that had nothing to do with fear for her life. "I can't," she whispered. "I don't belong here. I don't belong in your world." Something flickered across Dante's face, there and gone too fast to read. "You're in my world now, whether you like it or not," he said softly. "Your father made sure of that when he sent you to me." He was close, so close she could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, could count his eyelashes if she wanted to. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with a tenderness that seemed at odds with everything she knew about him. "I won't let anyone hurt you, Isabella," he said, and his voice was rough with something that might have been promise or threat or both. "You're under my protection now. That means you're mine." The word sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. Mine. As if she were a possession, something to be owned and kept and protected. She should have been offended, should have pulled away. But there was something in his eyes, something fierce and possessive and utterly sincere, that made her stay frozen in place. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would you do this? I'm nobody. I'm just a grad student. I'm not worth the trouble." Dante's jaw tightened, and for a moment something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Let me be very clear about something," he said, his voice low and intense. "In this city, I decide what's worth my trouble. And right now, keeping you safe is the only thing that matters." He stepped back then, and Isabella almost swayed at the sudden loss of his warmth. "Carlotta will bring you something to wear," he said, his voice once again controlled and businesslike. "Get cleaned up. Try to rest. We'll talk more in the morning." He turned to leave, and Isabella found herself speaking without thinking. "Dante?" He paused, looking back at her over his shoulder. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for saving me." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Don't thank me yet, Isabella," he said finally. "You don't know what you've gotten yourself into." Then he was gone, leaving her alone in the beautiful marble bathroom, with nothing but questions and a fear that was rapidly transforming into something far more dangerous. Something that felt almost like anticipation. Isabella couldn't sleep. She lay in the massive bed in the guest room Dante had given her, staring at the ceiling as the city lights painted shadows across the walls. The room was beautiful, decorated in soft grays and whites, with furniture that probably cost more than everything she'd ever owned combined. But comfort couldn't quiet her racing mind, couldn't stop the images that kept flashing behind her eyelids. Her father's face, the sound of gunshots, Dante's dark eyes watching her with an intensity that made her skin burn. She gave up on sleep around 3 in the morning and wandered out into the penthouse, wrapped in the silk robe Carlotta had left for her. The older woman had been kind, but distant, bringing her clothes and toiletries without asking questions. Isabella wouldn't have known how to answer. The penthouse was quiet, lit only by the glow of the city outside, and small accent lights that gave everything an otherworldly quality. Isabella found herself drawn to the windows, to the view of Chicago spread out below like a carpet of stars. She'd lived in this city her whole life, but she'd never seen it like this, from above, where it looked beautiful instead of dangerous. "Couldn't sleep?" The voice came from behind her, and Isabella spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Dante stood in the doorway of what she assumed was his study, still wearing his suit pants, but with his shirt unbuttoned, revealing a slice of tanned chest and the edge of what looked like a tattoo. He held a glass of amber liquid, and in the dim light, he looked both more human and more dangerous than he had before. "I'm sorry," Isabella said quickly. "I didn't mean to intrude. I'll go back to my room." "Stay," he said, and it was gentle, but still a command. He moved toward her with that same predatory grace, and Isabella's pulse quickened. "Want to tell me why you're wandering my penthouse at 3 in the morning instead of sleeping?" Isabella turned back to the window, unable to look at him, unable to process the way her body responded to his nearness. "Every time I close my eyes, I see him," she said quietly. "My father. The blood. I keep thinking if I'd just stayed away. If I hadn't gone to the restaurant that night, maybe he'd still be alive." "Don't," Dante said sharply, and she felt him move closer, felt the heat of him at her back. "Don't do that to yourself. What happened to Marco had nothing to do with you. Santoro would have come for him regardless. But why?" The question burst out of her, raw with grief and confusion. "My father ran a restaurant. He wasn't part of this world. Why would someone like Santoro care about him?" Dante was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. "Your father witnessed something he shouldn't have. A meeting between Santoro and a rival family. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and in our world, that's a death sentence. The words hung in the air between them, brutal in their honesty. Isabella felt tears burning behind her eyes again, but she blinked them back. She'd cried enough for one night. Our world, she repeated. You keep saying that like I'm part of it now. But I'm not. I don't know anything about this life, about how it works. She felt Dante move even closer, felt his breath on her neck, and every nerve in her body came alive. You're part of it because you're mine now, he said, his voice low and rough. Because I've claimed you, and in our world that means something. It means anyone who wants to hurt you has to go through me first. Isabella turned to face him and found him closer than she'd realized, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. I'm not yours, she said, but even to her own ears it sounded weak. I'm not anyone's. I'm just a person who wants to survive. Something dark and hungry flashed in Dante's eyes. You're mine the moment I decided to save you, he said, and there was possession in every word. You're mine because looking at you makes me forget every rule I've ever made for myself. You're mine because I would burn this entire city to the ground before I'd let anyone take you from me. The intensity of his words should have frightened her, should have sent her running back to her room, should have made her demand he take her somewhere, anywhere else. But instead, Isabella felt something dangerous unfurl in her chest, something that recognized the claim in his words and wanted to surrender to it. I don't understand this, she whispered. We just met. You don't know anything about me. Dante's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her lower lip with a gentleness that seemed impossible from a man like him. I know you're brave, he said softly. I know you held your dying father and didn't break. I know you ran through a storm-soaked city with killers on your heels and still had the courage to ask a stranger for help. I know you're standing here arguing with the most dangerous man in Chicago instead of cowering in your room. His other hand settled on her waist, pulling her incrementally closer, and Isabella felt her breath catch. And I know, he continued, his voice dropping even lower, that you feel this too. This pull between us. This thing that makes no sense but exists anyway. Isabella wanted to deny it, wanted to push him away and retreat to safety. But she couldn't, because he was right. From the moment she'd seen him step out of that car, from the moment his dark eyes had locked onto hers, she'd felt it. A connection that defied logic, that transcended reason. A pull so strong it terrified her. I'm not, she started, then stopped, swallowing hard. I'm not who you think I am. I'm not brave or strong. I'm just scared. Dante's expression softened in a way that transformed his entire face. Being scared doesn't mean you're not brave, Isabella. It means you're human. His hand slid from her waist to the small of her back, drawing her against him, and Isabella gasped at the sudden contact. He was all hard muscle and heat, solid and real, in a way that made her head spin. I should go back to my room, she said, but she didn't move, couldn't move. Dante smiled, and it was the first real smile she'd seen from him. Dangerous and beautiful and utterly devastating. You should, he agreed, but you won't. And then he was kissing her, and Isabella's world tilted on its axis. His lips were firm and demanding, claiming her mouth with a possessiveness that should have alarmed her, but instead set her on fire. She'd been kissed before, awkward, fumbling kisses with boys who didn't know what they were doing. This was nothing like that. This was a man who knew exactly what he wanted and exactly how to take it. His hand tangled in her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss, and Isabella heard herself make a sound she didn't recognize, needy and desperate. Her hands came up to grip his shoulders, holding on as the world spun around her. When Dante finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard, and Isabella felt like she'd been hit by lightning. "Go to bed, Isabella," he said, his voice rough with restraint, "before I forget every good intention I have." Isabella stood there for a moment, dizzy and confused, and wanting things she didn't fully understand. Then she turned and fled, practically running back to her room, her heart pounding and her lips still burning from his kiss. Behind her, she heard Dante release a long breath, and she wondered if he was as affected as she was, if his hands were shaking the way hers were. She closed the door to her room and leaned against it, pressing her fingers to her swollen lips. What was she doing? This man was dangerous, a killer, someone who lived in a world of violence and blood. But when he'd kissed her, when he'd held her like she was something precious, she'd felt safer than she ever had in her life. And that, Isabella knew, was the most dangerous thing of all. Morning came too quickly, and not quickly enough. Isabella woke to sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of coffee drifting through the penthouse. For a blissful moment, she forgot where she was, forgot everything that had happened. Then reality crashed back, and with it came the memory of Dante's kiss, the feel of his hands on her body, the dark hunger in his eyes. She dressed in the clothes Carlotta had provided, simple jeans and a soft sweater that fit perfectly, despite the woman never having asked her size. When she emerged from her room, she found Dante at the dining table, reading something on his tablet while he ate breakfast. He looked up when she entered, and Isabella felt her breath catch at the intensity in his gaze. "Good morning," he said, his voice giving nothing away. "Did you sleep?" "Eventually," Isabella lied, sliding into the chair across from him. The truth was, she'd lain awake for hours, replaying their kiss, touching her lips, and wondering what was wrong with her, that she wanted more. Carlotta appeared as if summoned, setting a plate of food in front of Isabella that made her stomach growl despite her nerves. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit, everything prepared perfectly. "Eat," Dante said, and it was gentle but still a command. "You barely touched dinner last night." Isabella picked up her fork, acutely aware of his eyes on her. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now we figure out how to keep you alive," Dante said bluntly. "Santoro won't stop looking for you. He can't afford to. Your father died because he knew too much, and Santoro will assume Marco told you everything before he died." "But he didn't," Isabella protested. "I don't know anything. I can't even tell you what this supposed secret is." Dante's jaw tightened. "Santoro doesn't know that, and even if he did, he'd kill you anyway. You're loose ends, and men like him don't leave loose ends." The casual way he discussed her murder should have been frightening, but Isabella was starting to understand that this was Dante's world. Death and danger were as common as breakfast. "So what do I do? Hide here forever?" Dante set down his coffee, leaning back in his chair as he studied her. "No. You live. You go back to school, you finish your degree. You don't let fear rule your life. But you do it under my protection, which means you follow my rules." "What rules?" Isabella asked warily. "You don't go anywhere without one of my men. You don't talk to anyone about your father or what happened. You don't try to leave the city or contact anyone from your old life without clearing it with me first." Each rule felt like a chain wrapping around her, limiting her freedom, binding her to him. "So I'm a prisoner," she said flatly. Dante's eyes flashed. "You're alive. There's a difference." The tension between them stretched taut, and Isabella felt anger rising to mix with the confusion and desire. "I didn't ask for this," she said. "I didn't ask to be part of your world, to be yours, to have my entire life controlled by someone I barely know." Dante was around the table before she could blink, his hands braced on the arms of her chair, caging her in. His face was inches from hers, his dark eyes blazing. "You think I asked for this?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You think I wanted to feel this way about a girl I just met? You think I wanted to be so consumed by the need to keep you safe that I can't think straight?" Isabella's heart was hammering, but she refused to look away. "Then let me go. Send me away somewhere safe, somewhere far from Chicago, and forget about me." "I can't," Dante said, and there was something almost anguished in his voice. "I've tried. I spent all night telling myself to arrange for you to disappear, to send you somewhere Santoro would never find you. But I can't. The thought of you being anywhere I can't reach you, anywhere I can't protect you, makes me want to destroy something." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "You've gotten under my skin, Isabella Romano. And I don't know what to do about it except keep you close and pray I don't destroy you in the process." The raw honesty in his words stole Isabella's breath. She saw the truth in his eyes, saw that he was as trapped by this thing between them as she was. "I'm scared," she whispered, "of Santoro, of this life, of you." "Good," Dante said softly. "Fear will keep you alert, keep you safe. But Isabella," he leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers, "don't ever be scared that I'll hurt you. I would die before I let that happen." Then he was kissing her again, and Isabella melted into it, her hands coming up to grip his shirt as she kissed him back, with all the confusion and desire and need she didn't know how to name. His hand slid into her hair, angling her head as he deepened the kiss, and Isabella felt herself falling, drowning in sensation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "Something you deserve to know before this goes any further." Isabella waited, her heart pounding, sensing that whatever he was about to say would change everything. "The favor your father did for me," Dante began, "it wasn't small. 5 years ago, I was in a bad situation. A rival family had me cornered, outnumbered, bleeding out in an alley not far from your father's restaurant." He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers. "Marco found me. He could have left me there, could have called the police or just walked away. Instead, he helped me, hid me in his restaurant, patched me up, gave me time to call my people. He saved my life, Isabella. And in our world, that debt is sacred." Isabella processed this, understanding clicking into place. "So you're protecting me out of obligation?" Dante's grip on her tightened. "I'm protecting you because I owe your father my life. But that's not why I can't let you go. That's not why I kissed you last night and can't stop thinking about doing it again." His voice dropped, rough with honesty. "I want you, Isabella, in ways I shouldn't, in ways I've never wanted anyone. And that has nothing to do with debt or honor, and everything to do with the fact that you've become an obsession I can't control." The confession hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Isabella knew she should be frightened by the intensity of his desire, by the possessiveness in his words, but all she felt was an answering want. A pull so strong it terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "I don't know what to do with this," she admitted. "I've never felt anything like this before. I don't know if what I'm feeling is real, or just some kind of reaction to trauma." Dante's expression softened. "Then we take it slow," he said. "We figure it out together. I'm not going anywhere, Isabella, and neither are you. We have time." But even as he said it, Isabella saw something flicker in his eyes, a shadow of doubt that made her wonder if time was something they really had. Before she could ask, Dante's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his entire expression changed, hardening into the dangerous mask she was coming to recognize. "I have to go," he said, stepping back from her. "Business that can't wait. Marco will be here within the hour to take you to campus. Don't leave the university until he comes to get you. Understand?" Isabella nodded, trying not to feel bereft at the sudden distance between them. "Dante," she called as he turned to leave. "Be careful." He paused, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Always am, Bella," he said softly. Then he was gone, leaving Isabella alone with her thoughts, and a fear that had nothing to do with Santoro, and everything to do with the dangerous man she was falling for against all reason and logic. The week that followed established a rhythm that should have felt strange, but somehow didn't. Marco, Dante's most trusted guard, became Isabella's constant shadow. He was a mountain of a man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor that contradicted his intimidating size. He drove her to Northwestern every morning, waited outside her classes, and brought her back to the penthouse every evening. At first, Isabella's classmates stared, whispered, speculated about the expensive car and the obvious bodyguard. But eventually, the novelty wore off, and life settled into something almost normal. Almost. Because nothing about her life was normal anymore. She lived in a penthouse that overlooked the city like a kingdom. She wore clothes that cost more than her old rent. And every night, she had dinner with a man who ruled Chicago's underworld with an iron fist, but looked at her like she was something precious and breakable and utterly essential. Dante was careful with her. He didn't push, didn't demand more than she was ready to give. But the tension between them grew with each passing day, building like a storm waiting to break. Stolen touches became longer. Kisses goodnight at her bedroom door grew deeper, more desperate. And Isabella found herself wanting more, craving things she'd never let herself want before. She was 23 years old, and she'd never been with anyone. Not because of some moral stance or religious belief, but simply because she'd never felt ready, never felt that connection with anyone that made her want to take that step. Until now. Until Dante. On Friday night, exactly 1 week after her father's death, Dante came home later than usual. Isabella was curled up on the couch reading when she heard the door open. She looked up and felt her heart clench at what she saw. He was exhausted, his tie loosened, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, and there was blood on his sleeve. "Dante," she breathed, setting down her book and crossing to him. "What happened? Are you hurt?" He looked down at the blood as if noticing it for the first time. "It's not mine," he said flatly. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" Isabella demanded, her hands trembling as she reached for him. Dante caught her wrists gently, holding her back. "Don't," he said softly. I'm not safe to touch right now." "I don't care," Isabella said, and she was surprised to realize it was true. She didn't care about the blood, or the danger, or the violence that was part of his world. She only cared that he was home, that he was whole, that he was here. Something cracked in Dante's expression. He pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair, and Isabella felt him tremble. "I had to do something tonight," he said, his voice muffled. "Something necessary but ugly, and all I could think about was getting back here, getting back to you." Isabella held him tighter, her hand smoothing over his back, offering comfort the only way she knew how. "It's okay," she whispered. "Whatever it was, it's okay." Dante pulled back, cupping her face in his hands, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "How can you say that?" he asked roughly. "You don't even know what I did, what I'm capable of." "I know enough," Isabella said. "I know you saved me. I know you've kept me safe. I know you're a good man trying to survive in a terrible world." "I'm not a good man," Dante said. But there was something desperate in his voice, as if he needed her to understand, needed her to see the worst of him before this went any further. "I've killed people, Isabella. I've hurt people." I've done things that would make you run screaming if you knew the details." Isabella met his gaze steadily. "Then tell me," she said quietly. "Tell me the worst thing you've ever done." Dante studied her for a long moment, and she could see him weighing the risk, deciding how much truth she could handle. "When I was 25, he finally said, a man betrayed my family. He gave information to our enemies that got my younger brother killed. Antonio was only 19, brilliant and kind, and completely unprepared for this life." His voice was steady, but Isabella could hear the pain beneath it. "I found the man who betrayed us, and I made sure his death took 3 days. 3 days of pain and fear and begging, until finally I put a bullet in his head and felt nothing but satisfaction." The confession hung between them, brutal in its honesty. Isabella knew she should be horrified, should pull away from this man who could speak so calmly about torture and murder. But all she felt was sadness, for the boy he must have been, for the brother he'd lost, for the man he'd had to become to survive. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "about your brother, about what was done to him and what you had to do because of it." Dante looked stunned, as if that was the last thing he'd expected her to say. "You're sorry," he repeated. "Isabella, did you hear what I just told you?" "I heard you," she said, stepping closer to him. "I heard that you loved your brother so much that losing him broke something inside you. I heard that you live in a world where justice comes at the end of a gun and mercy is a weakness that gets people killed. I heard all of it, Dante. And I'm not running." His hands tightened on her face, and she saw something fierce and almost desperate flash in his eyes. "You should run," he said roughly. "You should demand I send you away. Somewhere safe, somewhere far from me and this life. You should hate me for dragging you into this world." "But I don't," Isabella whispered. "I don't hate you, Dante. She stopped, the words catching in her throat because they were too big, too dangerous to speak aloud. But Dante must have seen them in her eyes, because he made a sound low in his throat and kissed her with a hunger that stole her breath. This kiss was different from the others. Those had been controlled, measured, Dante holding himself back. This was raw and desperate, a drowning man reaching for air. Isabella kissed him back with everything she had, pouring all her confusion and desire and need into it. His hands were everywhere, sliding down her sides, pulling her closer, tangling in her hair. She gripped his shoulders, feeling the muscles bunch and flex beneath her fingers, feeling the barely leashed power in him. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard, and Isabella felt dizzy with want. "Tell me to stop," Dante said, his voice rough. "Tell me to stop, and I will. Tell me this is too fast, too much, and I'll go take a cold shower and we'll pretend this didn't happen." Isabella looked up at him, at this dangerous, beautiful man who had somehow become essential to her in the span of a week. She thought about lying, about being sensible, about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Then she thought about her father's last words. "Find Dante. He's the only one who can protect you now." Maybe Marco had known. Maybe he'd seen what Isabella was only now understanding, that sometimes protection came in unexpected forms, that sometimes the most dangerous man was the safest place to be. "I don't want you to stop," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I want you, Dante." She saw the war play out on his face, desire battling with restraint. "Isabella," he said carefully, "you need to understand what you're saying. I'm not a gentleman. I'm not going to wine and dine you and wait for some perfect moment. If we do this, if we go down this road, I'm going to claim you in every way possible. and I'm not going to be able to let you go." The possessiveness in his words should have frightened her. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in her belly. "I don't want you to let me go," she said. Then, because she needed him to understand, needed him to know what he was getting, she added softly, "But Dante, I'm a virgin," Dante finished, his voice strained. "I know." Isabella's eyes widened. "How did you know?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "The way you blush when I touch you. The way you kiss like you're discovering something new. The way you look at me like I'm both terrifying and fascinating." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her lower lip. "I know, Bella. And it changes nothing, except that I'm going to be very, very careful with you." The promise in his words made Isabella's knees weak. "I'm not fragile," she protested. "I won't break." Dante's smile turned darker, more dangerous. "No," he agreed, "you won't. But I'm still going to treat you like you're made of glass, at least until you beg me not to." The image his words conjured made Isabella's breath catch. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "I don't know how this works." Dante pressed his forehead to hers, his breath warm on her lips. "Then let me show you," he murmured. "Let me teach you. Let me make this good for you, Isabella. Let me give you everything you deserve." And when he kissed her again, gentle and deep and achingly tender, Isabella let herself fall, trusting that this dangerous man would catch her, would keep her safe, would give her everything she'd never known she wanted. Dante led Isabella to his bedroom, and she had a fleeting impression of dark colors and masculine furniture, before her attention focused entirely on the man in front of her. He cupped her face in his hands, his dark eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her tremble. "Last chance," he said softly. "Tell me now if you want to stop. Because once I start touching you, once I start showing you what this can be, I won't be able to hold back." Isabella's heart was racing, but she'd never been more certain of anything in her life. "I don't want to stop," she whispered. "Please, Dante, I want this. I want you." Something blazed in his eyes, hot and possessive, before he kissed her with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the hunger she could feel vibrating through him. His hands moved to the hem of her sweater, and he paused, giving her one more chance to change her mind. When she didn't protest, he slowly drew the fabric up and over her head, leaving her standing before him in just her jeans and a simple cotton bra. She fought the urge to cover herself, to hide from the intensity of his gaze as it moved over her. "Beautiful," Dante murmured, his fingers tracing the line of her collarbone down to the edge of her bra. "So damn beautiful, Isabella." His touch was feather-light, almost reverent, and Isabella felt goosebumps rise in its wake. She reached for his shirt, her fingers fumbling with the buttons. Dante stood still, letting her undress him at her own pace, and when she finally pushed the fabric off his shoulders, she had to catch her breath. He was magnificent. All lean muscle and tanned skin, with that tattoo she'd glimpsed before, now fully visible. It was an intricate design that covered his left shoulder and part of his chest. Dark ink that spoke of pain and permanence. There were scars, too, silver lines that told stories of violence survived. Isabella touched one tentatively, a long scar that ran along his ribs. "Does it hurt?" she asked softly. "Not anymore," Dante said, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "They're just reminders of who I am, what I've survived." He guided her hand to his chest, over his heart, and she could feel it pounding beneath her palm. "This is what hurts, Isabella. This ache I feel when I look at you. This need that grows stronger every day." His words undid her. She went up on her toes and kissed him, pouring everything she felt but couldn't say into it. Dante responded with a low groan, his arms wrapping around her as he deepened the kiss. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. He lifted her easily, carrying her to the bed and laying her down on sheets that were cool and soft against her heated skin. Then he was above her, his weight supported on his forearms as he looked down at her with such intensity it stole her breath. "If anything I do scares you or hurts you," he said seriously, "you tell me immediately." "Promise me, Isabella." "I promise," she whispered, touched by his concern, by the care he was taking, despite the obvious desire darkening his eyes. Dante kissed her again, slow and deep, as his hands began to explore. He touched her like she was something precious, his calloused fingers tracing patterns on her skin that made her shiver and arch beneath him. When his lips followed the path of his hands, trailing kisses down her throat, across her collarbone, to the valley between her breasts. Isabella heard herself make sounds she'd never made before, needy and desperate. "Please," she whispered, though she wasn't entirely sure what she was begging for. Dante seemed to understand anyway. His hands went to the button of her jeans, and he paused, looking up at her face. At her nod, he slowly drew the denim down her legs, taking her simple cotton underwear with it, until she lay before him completely bare. For a moment, Isabella felt exposed, vulnerable, unsure. But then she saw the expression on Dante's face, the reverence and hunger, and something that looked almost like pain, and all her uncertainty melted away. "Perfect," he breathed. "You're absolutely perfect, Isabella." His hand stroked up her legs, over her thighs, making her tremble. When his fingers found her most sensitive place, Isabella gasped, her hips lifting involuntarily. "Easy," Dante murmured, his voice rough. "I've got you, Bella. Just let me make you feel good." And he did. His touch was skilled and patient, building sensation slowly, carefully, paying attention to every gasp and moan and responding accordingly. When Isabella felt pleasure building to an impossible peak, she reached for him, her fingers digging into his shoulders. "Dante," she gasped. "I can't, oh God." "Let go," he commanded softly. "Let go, Isabella. I've got you." And she did, shattering apart with a cry that was part pleasure and part his name, trembling in his arms as he held her through it. When she finally came back to herself, Dante was watching her with such tenderness it made her chest ache. "That was," she started, then stopped because she had no words for what she'd just experienced. Dante smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "That was just the beginning," he promised. He stood, removing the rest of his clothes, and Isabella couldn't look away. He was beautiful and intimidating in equal measure, and she felt a flutter of nervousness return. As if sensing her anxiety, Dante returned to the bed, gathering her close. "We can stop here if you want," he said gently. "What we just did, that's enough for tonight." But Isabella shook her head. She'd come this far, felt this much. She wanted all of it, wanted the complete connection she could feel hovering just out of reach. "No," she said firmly. "I want this. I want you. All of you." Dante's jaw tightened, and she saw him fighting for control. "It might hurt at first," he warned. "I'll be as gentle as I can. But Isabella, you need to tell me if it's too much." "I trust you," she said simply, and watched those 3 words hit him like a physical blow. He kissed her again, long and deep, as his body settled over hers. Isabella felt him position himself, felt the moment of pressure, and then Dante was pushing forward slowly, carefully, his eyes never leaving her face. The sensation was strange, uncomfortable, a burning stretch that made her tense. "Breathe," Dante murmured against her lips. "Breathe through it, Bella. I've got you." Isabella tried to relax, tried to breathe, but when Dante pushed deeper, She couldn't help the small sound of pain that escaped. He froze immediately. "Do you want me to stop?" he asked, and she could hear the strain in his voice, feel how much holding back was costing him. "No," Isabella said, because despite the discomfort, despite the strangeness, she wanted this, wanted him, wanted to belong to him in this most fundamental way. "Please don't stop. I'm okay, I promise." Dante kissed her again, soft and reassuring, as he continued forward, until finally he was fully seated, their bodies joined completely. He stayed still, giving her time to adjust, and Isabella focused on his face, on the tension there, on the fierce control he was exerting. "Move," she whispered. "Please, Dante. I need." He did, slowly at first, carefully, watching her face for any sign of pain. And gradually, the discomfort faded, replaced by something else. Something building and beautiful and entirely new. Isabella wrapped her arms around him, holding him close as he moved above her, their bodies finding a rhythm that felt ancient and perfect. When pleasure began to build again, Isabella couldn't quite believe it. "That's it," Dante encouraged, his voice strained. "Come for me again, Isabella. Let me feel you." And when she did, when she shattered apart again with his name on her lips, Dante followed her over the edge, burying his face in her neck as he found his own release with a groan that sounded almost anguished. They lay tangled together in the aftermath, both breathing hard, both trembling slightly. Dante carefully withdrew from her body, and Isabella winced at the slight discomfort. His eyes darkened with concern. "Did I hurt you?" he asked, his hand cupping her face. "I tried to be gentle, but—" "You were perfect," Isabella interrupted, turning her head to press a kiss to his palm. "It was perfect, Dante. I'm just a little sore." He kissed her forehead, then rose from the bed. Isabella watched him cross to the bathroom, admiring the play of muscles under his skin, the way he moved with such unconscious grace. He returned moments later with a warm washcloth, and Isabella felt herself blush as he gently cleaned her, his touch careful and tender. When he climbed back into bed, he pulled her against his chest, and Isabella curled into him, feeling safe and cherished and utterly transformed. They lay in silence for a while, just holding each other, both lost in their own thoughts. "What are you thinking?" Dante finally asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Isabella considered lying, considered saying something light and meaningless. But after what they'd just shared, she felt like they were past pretense. "I'm thinking that a week ago, my biggest worry was my thesis deadline," she said softly. "And now I'm lying in bed with a man who kills people for a living, and I don't feel any of the things I should feel. I should be horrified. I should be planning my escape. But all I feel is safe and wanted, and like maybe this is exactly where I'm supposed to be." Dante was quiet for a moment, his hand stilling on her shoulder. "A week ago," he said finally, "I thought I had my life figured out. I thought I knew who I was, what I wanted. I thought I was content with the empire I'd built, the power I wielded. And then a terrified girl crashed into my life, and suddenly none of that mattered anymore." He shifted so he could look down at her, his dark eyes serious. "You've changed everything, Isabella. The way I think, the way I see the world, what matters to me. I look at you, and I want things I never thought I'd want. A future, a life that's more than just survival and power plays." Isabella's breath caught at the vulnerability in his voice, at the raw honesty. "What kind of things?" she whispered. Dante's thumb traced her lower lip, his expression tender. "Normal things. Coming home to you every night, waking up beside you every morning, building something real that isn't based on fear and violence. Maybe even," he paused, as if surprised by his own thoughts, "a family someday. Children who grow up safe and loved, who never have to know the kind of life I've lived. The picture he painted made Isabella's heart ache with longing. "That sounds nice," she said softly. "But Dante, is that even possible? Can you really walk away from this life?" His expression hardened slightly. "No," he admitted. "I can't walk away. This life, this world, it's not something you just leave. You're in it until you die, and usually that death comes violently and young. But I can build walls around you, around us, around the life we make together. I can keep the worst of it away from you, give you as much normalcy as possible." "I don't want you to pretend to be something you're not," Isabella said. "I don't want you to hide parts of yourself from me. I can handle the truth, Dante. I can handle who you are." Dante kissed her, soft and sweet. "You're braver than you know," he murmured against her lips. Then his expression grew serious. "But Isabella, there are things in my world that aren't safe for you to know. Information that could put you in danger. I need you to trust me when I say there are parts of my life I have to keep separate from you." Isabella wanted to argue, wanted to demand he tell her everything. But she understood what he was saying. Knowledge was dangerous in his world. The less she knew about certain things, the safer she would be. "Okay," she agreed. "But Dante, you have to promise me something." "Anything," he said without hesitation. "Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't take unnecessary risks. Because She stopped, the words catching in her throat. Dante's eyes intensified. "Say it," he commanded softly. "Whatever you're thinking, say it, Isabella." "I love you," she whispered, and the words felt both terrifying and liberating. "I know it's too soon. I know it doesn't make sense, but I do. I love you, Dante Moretti. And the thought of losing you terrifies me more than anything Santoro could do." For a moment, Dante just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then he was kissing her with such intensity, it stole her breath. With such tenderness, it brought tears to her eyes. "I love you too," he said against her lips. "God help me, Isabella. But I love you more than I knew it was possible to love anyone. You've become my everything, and I would burn the whole world down before I'd let anyone take you from me." They made love again, slower this time, with Dante murmuring words in Italian that sounded like prayers and promises. And afterward, as Isabella drifted toward sleep in his arms, she felt like she'd finally found the place she belonged. The days that followed were a blur of stolen moments and growing intimacy. Dante was careful with her, giving her body time to adjust, but the passion between them only grew stronger. Isabella went to her classes, worked on her thesis, tried to maintain some semblance of normal life. But everything was colored by the knowledge that she was in love with Chicago's most dangerous man, that she'd given him not just her body, but her heart and soul. One evening, 2 weeks after that first night together, Isabella was in Dante's study when she noticed a file on his desk. It was labeled with a single word, Santoro. She knew she shouldn't look, knew that Dante kept certain things private for a reason. But curiosity won out, and she opened the file. What she saw made her blood run cold. Photos of a man she recognized from news reports. Documents detailing weapons, shipments, drug operations, human trafficking. And at the bottom, a detailed plan for what could only be described as an assassination. Isabella's hands were shaking as she set the file down, but it was too late. Dante stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he watched her. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I know I shouldn't have looked. It's fine," Dante said, though his voice was tight. He crossed to her, taking the file and setting it aside. "You were going to find out eventually anyway. I'm moving against Santoro tomorrow night." Isabella felt her stomach drop. Moving against him, how? Dante's jaw tightened. The only way that ends this, Isabella. I'm going to kill him. The words hung in the air between them, brutal in their simplicity. Isabella knew she should be horrified, should protest, should try to talk him out of it. But she understood this world well enough now to know that as long as Santoro lived, she would never be safe. As long as he breathed, the man who killed her father walked free. Okay, she said quietly, but I have one condition. Dante raised an eyebrow. You don't get to make conditions, Bella. Not about this. Yes, I do, Isabella said firmly. If you're doing this for me, if you're putting yourself in danger to keep me safe, then I get to make one condition. She could see him fighting between amusement and frustration. What condition? You come back to me, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Whatever happens tomorrow night, however dangerous it gets, you do whatever it takes to come back to me. Because I can't lose you, Dante. I can't survive losing someone else I love. Dante's expression softened. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. I'll come back, he promised. I'll always come back to you, Isabella. You're my home now, the only place I want to be. That night, they made love with a desperation that spoke of fear and love, and the knowledge that tomorrow might change everything. And when Isabella finally fell asleep, it was with Dante's arms around her and his promise echoing in her mind. The next day passed in agonizing slowness. Dante left early, pressing a kiss to Isabella's forehead and murmuring promises he might not be able to keep. Marco stayed with her, his usually kind face serious and watchful. Isabella tried to focus on her thesis, on anything that would distract her from the fear clawing at her chest. But every time she looked at the clock, every minute that ticked by felt like an eternity. Evening came, and with it a storm that mirrored the one from the night she'd first met Dante. Rain lashed against the windows, and thunder rumbled like distant artillery. Isabella stood at the window, staring out at the city and trying not to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. Her phone buzzed, and she grabbed it with shaking hands. But it wasn't Dante. It was an unknown number, and the message made her blood run cold. If you ever want to see your lover alive again, come to the old warehouse on 5th Street. Alone. You have 1 hour. Isabella's mind raced. This had to be a trap. Santoro must have found out about Dante's plan, must have captured him somehow. But what if it was real? What if Dante was hurt, bleeding, dying while she stood here safe in his penthouse? She looked at Marco, standing guard by the door. She knew he would never let her leave, would physically restrain her if necessary. So she did the only thing she could think of. Marco, she called, forcing her voice to sound casual. I'm going to take a bath and go to bed early. I have class in the morning. He nodded, looking relieved that she wasn't asking to go anywhere. Isabella went to the bathroom, turned on the water to make it sound convincing, then quietly slipped out through the bedroom and down the service elevator that Dante had once shown her. The rain soaked her within seconds of stepping outside, but she didn't care. She hailed a cab, gave the driver the address, and prayed she wasn't making the biggest mistake of her life. The warehouse was exactly what she expected. Dark, abandoned, the perfect place for violence and death. Isabella's hands shook as she pushed open the rusted door, her heart hammering so hard she could barely breathe. Hello, she called into the darkness. Lights blazed on, blinding her. When her vision cleared, she saw him. Santoro stood in the center of the warehouse, and at his feet, bound and bleeding, was Dante. No, Isabella whispered, horror washing over her. Dante's face was battered, his shirt torn and stained with blood. But his eyes, when they locked on hers, were filled with fury and fear. Isabella, run! He shouted, struggling against his bonds. It's a trap! Get out of here! Santoro laughed, the sound echoing through the empty space. "Too late for that," he said. "She's here now, and she's going to watch you die, Moretti. Just like you were planning to watch me die." He pulled out a gun, pressing it to Dante's head, and Isabella felt her world tilt. "Wait," she said desperately. "Please, let him go. I'll do anything. I'll tell you whatever you want to know. Just please don't kill him." Santoro's smile was cruel. "There's nothing you can tell me that I don't already know, girl. This isn't about information. This is about sending a message. Nobody moves against me. Nobody." His finger tightened on the trigger, and Isabella did the only thing she could think of. She ran forward, throwing herself between Dante and the gun just as it went off. The sound was deafening. Pain exploded through Isabella's shoulder, white-hot and all-consuming. She heard Dante scream her name, heard chaos erupt around her, but it all seemed distant, muffled, as if she were underwater. She collapsed, her vision swimming, and the last thing she saw before darkness took her was Dante's face, twisted in anguish and rage. When Isabella woke, she was in a hospital bed, her shoulder wrapped in bandages and her body aching. For a moment, she couldn't remember what had happened. Then it all came rushing back. The warehouse, Santoro, the gun, Dante. She tried to sit up, panic flooding her. "Dante!" she gasped. "Where's Dante? Is he?" "I'm here." His voice came from beside the bed, rough with exhaustion, and something that sounded like tears. Isabella turned her head and found him sitting in a chair next to her, looking like he'd been through hell. His face was bruised, his knuckles bloody, and there were shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. But he was alive. He was here. "You're okay," she whispered, relief making her dizzy. Dante made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "I'm okay. Isabella, you took a bullet for me. You threw yourself in front of a gun. You could have died." His hand gripped hers so tightly it almost hurt. "Don't you ever do that again. Do you understand me? Don't you ever risk yourself like that for me?" "I couldn't let him kill you," Isabella said simply. "I'd rather die than watch that happen." Dante's eyes were wet, and she'd never seen him look so vulnerable, so shattered. "You're mine to protect," he said fiercely. "Not the other way around. I'm supposed to keep you safe, and instead, you." His voice broke, and he pressed his forehead to their joined hands. Isabella stroked his hair with her good hand, offering what comfort she could. "What happened?" she asked. "After I blacked out?" Dante took a shaky breath. "My men were already surrounding the warehouse. When they heard the gunshot, they moved in. Santoro's dead, Isabella. I killed him myself for what he did to you." There was no triumph in his voice, only a grim satisfaction. "It's over. You're safe now." "We're safe," Isabella corrected. "Both of us." She paused, then asked the question that had been haunting her. "How long have I been here?" 3 days, Dante said. 3 days of hell waiting for you to wake up, praying you'd be okay, terrified I'd lost you." He lifted his head, his dark eyes meeting hers. "I've never been so scared in my life, Isabella. Not when I was shot. Not when my brother died. Never. The thought of losing you nearly destroyed me." Isabella pulled him closer with her good arm, and Dante carefully climbed onto the hospital bed beside her, mindful of her injury. He held her gently, as if she might break, and Isabella felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you so much, Dante." "I love you too," he said against her hair. "More than anything in this world. You're my everything, Isabella. My reason for breathing. My future. My home." They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other, both grateful to be alive, to be together. And when Dante finally pulled back, there was something in his eyes that made Isabella's breath catch. "Marry me," he said. It wasn't a question, but it wasn't quite a command either. It was somewhere in between, vulnerable and certain all at once. Isabella stared at him. "What?" "Marry me," Dante repeated. "I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but Isabella, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I want you as my wife. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to build a life with you, have children with you, grow old with you. Say yes." Isabella felt joy bubbling up inside her, bright and overwhelming. "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you, Dante Moretti. Today, tomorrow, whenever you want." Dante kissed her then, gentle because of her injury, but no less passionate for it. And Isabella knew, with absolute certainty, that this was right. That despite the violence and the danger and the impossibility of it all, they belonged together. 2 months later, Isabella stood in a small chapel, wearing a simple white dress that made her feel like a princess. Her shoulder had healed, leaving only a small scar that Dante kissed every night, a reminder of what she'd been willing to sacrifice for him. The chapel was filled with Dante's people, men who looked dangerous, but smiled with genuine warmth when she walked down the aisle. And at the end of that aisle stood Dante, looking devastating in a black suit, his eyes never leaving her face. When they spoke their vows, when they promised to love and cherish each other for the rest of their lives, Isabella felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness, of belonging, of home. And later, in the penthouse that was now truly theirs, Dante made love to his wife with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice," he whispered against her skin. "I'll protect you, cherish you, love you, until my last breath and beyond." "I know," Isabella said, pulling him closer. "I've always known. Sometimes love comes in unexpected packages. Sometimes the most dangerous man is the safest place to be. Sometimes a girl running for her life finds not just protection, but everything she never knew she was looking for. And sometimes, just sometimes, even in a world of violence and darkness, love can bloom bright enough to light the way home." If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Tell me in the comments if you believe in love that defies all odds. Your presence here means everything, and I can't wait to share more stories with you.